In California, there is a bristlecone pine that has stood for almost 5,000 years. In Sri Lanka, a sacred fig tree planted 2,300 years ago still grows today. In my home state of Colorado, the lodgepole pine requires fire to melt the resin around their seeds so new trees can sprout. Trees are among the most ancient living things on the planet. They provide shade and shelter, clean air, and beautiful surroundings. They support life within ecosystem and beyond. Scientists say trees have a nervous system that facilitates learning, communication, and memory. It's no wonder we call nerve cell appendages dendrites, taken from dendron, the Greek word for tree. These amazing organisms have lived through so much and have the scars to prove it, yet their beauty and strength endure. As I walk in these forests amid the rustling limbs, colorful leaves, and sounds of birds, I am restored, but I cannot forget how much the past 2 years have fundamentally changed us. Hard-fought challenges and lessons learned require us to rewrite the rules for ourselves. Nurses are truly rooted in strength, forged in fire, and growing in power. Our beauty and our strength endure.
Please welcome AACN President Beth Wathen.
'Cause we are warriors, we'll fight for our lives like soldiers. All through the night and we won't give up.
Wow, we're back together again. How does it feel? Pretty incredible. What a road we have traveled these last 2 years. I'm grateful your road led you here, since we have so much to catch up on, so many stories to tell, and so much to feel. So where do we start? In 4 minutes, today's poignant opening video showed us where we started, where we've been, and where we are now. But there's so much more to be said. Because although we've traveled the same road, our experiences over the past 2 years have been as varied as we are as individuals. One way or another, all of us have been deeply impacted by this pandemic and been touched by the challenges and emotions that come from caring for patients and families during trying times like these. We've experienced pain, and we've experienced beauty. Author Glennon Doyle says it so well. There is beauty to be found in the pain. Life is brutal, but it's also beautiful. As a community of nurses, we were touched by the public's response at first. Early on, there was recognition when we were universally acclaimed as heroes. Then came the anger. It was born of frustration, and it was nurses who received much of this anger. Why? Because we were still there, as nurses always are. We didn't abandon anybody, no matter the risk or pain to ourselves. We'll talk more about that because it continues to be one of our greatest lessons. As individual nurses, our experiences were wide-ranging. Some experiences came from circumstance, some from choice. We worked unsafe numbers of shifts in a row. We reused PPE when supplies ran out. Some of us felt like new grads, like deer in the headlights. Some of us were new grads. As leaders, we cried with rage. We often did it hiding so our coworkers wouldn't see we hurt as much as they did. Some became travel nurses when better pay and a different workplace seemed better than what we already knew. Some considered taking their own lives, and some did. But did this pandemic cause all of this? No, it didn't. During last year's virtual NTI, I said the pandemic was like a wildfire. Looking back, it was really an accelerant, like kerosene poured on burning embers. So many of us were experiencing burnout, compassion fatigue, moral injury, long before COVID began. Even more of us already worked in unhealthy environments without fair compensation or enough staff. Lately, I've thought about the trees left standing after a blaze. Many of them survived, burned and scarred, but rooted in strength, they hold firm. Like our nursing community, I know the scars are immense, and so much lies ahead. Yet I find comfort in the words of the writer and philosopher Khalil Gibran, who wrote, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." So where and how do we begin to heal? Let me ask you this. How many of you flew to Houston to be here with us this week? Most of us, right? Do you remember this safety announcement before you took off?
Should the cabin lose pressure, oxygen masks will drop from the overhead area. Please place the mask over your own mouth and nose before assisting others.
So think about it. How can we help others when we need healing ourselves? It's not negotiable. We have to make our own physical and mental safety our top priority. Period. So how do we do this? First, by remembering who we are, because our conviction and passion and what we do as nurses provide us with some of the strongest roots there are. We were strong in providing the essential and often life-saving care our patients and families needed. We were strong in compassion as we held the hands of countless patients, too often as a surrogate for their loved ones. We were strong and innovative, adapting our care to meet the moment, even while our nation's brittle healthcare system inched towards the edge. We kept it from sliding off. We showed up, we stepped up, and we spoke up. The strength in our roots held fast. We did this as individuals, and we did it as a community. We gained seats at influential tables. Sometimes we even invited ourselves. Now we have new connections at the White House, the Office of the Surgeon General, the National Academy of Medicine, the CDC, and the Joint Commission. These powerful partners will join us to elevate how we advocate for our community of acute and critical care nurses. When the public forgot that they called us heroes, we launched the Hear Us Out campaign to tell our story. We helped the public to help us to help them. And we did that by showing people how to have conversations to overcome vaccine hesitancy. We modeled for everyone to see what writer and Pulitzer Prize winner Richard Powers said: "The best arguments in the world won't change a single person's mind. The only thing that can do that is a good story." And speaking of heroes, let's talk about that. Arthur Ashe, who won 3 Grand Slam tennis titles, said, True heroism is remarkably sober, very undramatic. It's not the urge to surpass all others at whatever cost, but the urge to serve others at whatever cost. During the pandemic, we did what nurses always do. That doesn't mean what we always do isn't heroic. We are heroes. Whether it's out of humility or the trauma of these times, don't let yourself think otherwise. Let's own our heroism. We earned it. So now, as I mentioned earlier, the pandemic didn't create all the issues we're facing. Many existed prior. And AACN has been relentlessly addressing them year after year to ensure nurses' voices are heard. We've learned our bold advocacy isn't well known by all members of our community. So recently, we started to gather in virtual nurse-to-nurse town halls. These are open forums where we experience the indisputable power of community. The forum topics are crowdsourced with community input, so they don't become one-way communication. This is important because our strength lies in our respect for individual viewpoints and in the influence of our unified voice. Most exciting of all, let me tell you about the Nurse Staffing Think Tank. This group started meeting in January and is sponsored by 5 highly influential healthcare organizations: AACN, ANA, the American Nurses Association, AONL, the American Organization for Nursing Leadership, IHI, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and HFMA, which is the Healthcare Financial Management Association. I'm proud to say it was a model of true collaboration in keeping with the AACN Healthy Work Environment Standards. The think tank focused squarely on the standard of appropriate staffing. We took this on because the consequences of inappropriate staffing are becoming undeniably clear. From hospital boards and administrators to physicians and the public, they now know what we have always known, that when there aren't enough nurses, there is a point beyond which safe care simply cannot be delivered. AACN is committed to tackling this issue with our colleagues boldly to bring about fundamental change that powerfully addresses this unacceptable reality. Just 4 months after it started, at the end of April, the think tank released priority topics and recommendations. This work maps an aggressive action plan for the cultural shift that healthcare delivery needs to improve nurse retention, work environments, and patient outcomes. So what have we learned from our shared experiences these past 2 years? We've learned that nurses cannot be taken for granted. We've learned that when nurses advocate, people listen, and that nurses cannot be the only ones participating in fixing the healthcare system. We've learned that nurses were there from the bedside to the White House. We showed up, stepped up, and spoke up. We've learned that we must continue to advocate for healthy work environments for ourselves and for our patients. Healthy work environments are a right, not a privilege. We've learned the value of showing up for each other with compassion and grace. And when we do that, it gives us the moments of joy we wholeheartedly deserve. Above all, we've learned the importance, no, the absolute necessity to prioritize our own well-being. Everything we've learned echoes the undeniable strength of our roots, the strength we need to create our ideal future. Sometimes that can feel like we're trying to move mountains. Taking the long view, it means we understand our strength. We embrace our strength. We will use our strength. We will create momentum by finding the right tables and showing up as individuals and as an organization to speak out about what nurses need. And if there isn't a table, we'll set it. Strength is about all nurses standing together, leveraging our diversity, working in unity to achieve change that is impactful and sustainable. Strength means advocating in even bolder ways, once again, as individuals and as an organization. That's the long view. So what about now? What we do in this moment becomes our story. This NTI will be all about stories. What story will people tell about us at future NTIs? What story will we tell? I know I'll be telling with deep pride the story of how nurses emerged from the first pandemic in 100 years. Not disillusioned or demoralized, instead, rooted in strength, we transformed the healthcare system to make our optimal contributions as nurses. And because of this transformation, American healthcare was forever changed. That will be our story. Thank you.
'Cause we are one.